In the cold steel of a downtown police precinct, a man once untouchable now sat shackled, his eyes locked on a small child standing quietly before him. The billionaire's empire, built on ambition and ruthless deals, had crumbled overnight. Across the city, a glass tower soared into the stormy sky, where a woman, her face splashed across the cover of Time magazine, sat alone, sobbing, the weight of failure crushing her spirit. A voice whispered, "He built an empire, but he couldn't save her." No names, no history, only the raw collision of power and heartbreak. This was not a story about success, but about what money couldn't fix: fractured love and shattered family. No one knew their names yet, but the story began here, where raw pain met cold ambition. The man's empire was falling apart in public disgrace, but what haunted him most wasn't the headlines, it was the child's silent judgment. Meanwhile, high above the city, the woman wrestled with the crushing loneliness that came with power. The same glass that reflected her triumph also trapped her tears. This was the paradox of success: to gain everything, but risk losing what mattered most. Outside, the world carried on unaware. Traffic flowed, neon signs buzzed, and people hurried by, unaware of the broken empire, the fractured family, the silent promises made in dark rooms. In a small, neglected apartment, the child clutched a worn photograph, eyes full of questions. The man's mistakes weren't just business failures, they were wounds left raw on the ones he loved most. And somewhere in that silence, hope flickered, fragile and uncertain. Inside the glass tower, the woman wiped away the last of her tears and straightened her posture. This was the world she'd fought for, the pinnacle of success. Yet the emptiness inside felt like a cavern. She whispered to the night, "I wanted nothing to do with love, not anymore." But fate had other plans. Sometimes the very walls built to protect us become prisons, and the only way out is through the very thing we fear most. Across the city, in a stark contrast, the man sat in a cold holding cell, shadows swallowing the edges of his face. The child's presence lingered like a ghost between them, silent, accusing. The empire might have been his to build, but the love he needed to save it was slipping through his fingers. In that quiet, desperate moment, a realization dawned. The most powerful empires are fragile without the bonds that hold us together. Before the polished boardrooms and glowing headlines, there was a small child standing silently in the fading light of a suburban backyard. She watched her father crumble beneath the crushing weight of his mistakes, his empire unraveling, his dreams slipping through his fingers. The pain of witnessing his failure etched itself deep within her young heart, carving out a cold resolve that would shape her future. "I will never be like him," she promised herself, a vow whispered with trembling lips. In her innocent eyes, love had become a dangerous vulnerability, a weakness she could not afford. Yet beneath the hardness, fragile hope flickered quietly, a hope that one day she would find the strength where he had lost it, and rewrite the story that had haunted their family for generations. Years passed, and the girl grew into a woman standing tall, but carrying invisible scars from wounds inflicted by rejection. In her own boardroom, her voice was silenced by doubters who questioned her place. Doors closed before her, opportunities denied not because of lack of talent, but because of old prejudices and whispered doubts. But she refused to be broken. Every closed door sharpened her resolve, transforming disappointment into fuel. She was determined to prove that her power was not merely inherited, but earned, through sweat, grit, and relentless sacrifice. Behind the calm, composed facade burned an unyielding fire, one born of wounds from the past and a fierce desire to reclaim her family's legacy, on her own terms, rewriting the narrative once and for all. Far from the gleaming corporate towers, a young boy sat alone in a cramped, cluttered corner store. His small hands clutched a worn, faded toy, a fragile tether to a simpler world. Nearby, his mother pleaded softly but urgently with the stern store manager for a job, their uncertain future hanging on every word. Their world was small and fragile, bounded by struggle and relentless uncertainty. Yet even here, in this modest struggle for survival, the seeds of ambition were quietly planted. The boy's silent witness to his mother's tireless fight etched a fierce determination within him, a fierce desire to rise above hardship and claim a better life. He learned early that true power and success could mean safety and freedom, but only if he never forgot where he came from. The wounds carried by these young souls, fear, shame, love, and burning fire, wove a complex and delicate dance, shaping their paths forward. The girl who had vowed never to be weak now wrapped her heart in walls built from pain and resilience. The boy who longed for security hardened his gaze, focusing on a future carved out of determination and grit. Though their stories unfolded in separate worlds, they were threads in the same tapestry, woven with scars but dyed with fierce resolve. These burdens would fuel their ascent, powering their rise to claim what had once seemed impossible. Yet they also threatened to consume all that they cherished, testing their strength at every turn. Power was never just about control or wealth. It was about carrying the weight of the past and forging a new legacy from the ashes. Each step forward echoed with the voices of those who came before, and the silent promise to do better, to be stronger, to heal what had been broken. These young warriors bore the scars of love lost and battles fought in silence, their wounds unseen but deeply felt. As city lights flickered on beneath an expansive night sky, they prepared to claim their rightful place, not as victims chained to the past, but as architects of a future where love and ambition could finally coexist. This was their moment to redefine what true strength meant. Her journey truly began in the stillness before dawn, when the city lay wrapped in darkness and silence, but her mind refused rest. Ideas spun endlessly through her thoughts, business plans, pitch rehearsals, strategies for a future she was determined to claim. Sleepless nights melted into bleary-eyed mornings, the glow of her laptop screen the only light in an otherwise empty office. Each day demanded sacrifice, lost birthdays she didn't celebrate, missed calls from friends she never returned, quiet moments swallowed by work. Yet amid the exhaustion, every small win, a handshake sealing a deal, a nod from a skeptical investor, ignited a fragile ember of hope. This relentless climb was brutal, but she believed, deep down, it would all be worth the cost. As days turned into months, the sacrifices deepened and multiplied. Birthdays passed unnoticed, friendships frayed under the strain of distance and silence, and moments of joy became rare and fleeting. Yet, in the harsh glare of boardrooms and investor meetings, she wore confidence like armor, perfectly tailored, unshakable. Beneath it, exhaustion nibbled away at her edges, but she refused to show weakness. Each no from potential backers only sharpened her resolve, fueling a quiet vow whispered into the night. This is not the end. It's only the beginning. Every lonely late night became a silent promise to herself to keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. But the victories came at a rising price. Friends who had once been constants became distant memories, their calls unanswered, their texts unread. Lovers slipped away quietly, unable to compete with the endless demands of her ambition. Loneliness settled in like a shadow, disguised as independence but aching beneath her skin. With every step forward, the gap between the life she dreamed of and the life she was living widened. The business grew stronger, yet her heart grew heavier, quietly carrying the cost of what she'd sacrificed: connection, warmth, and the simple joys of human closeness. Her relentless rise was not just a battle against competitors or market forces, it was a fight against her own doubts and fears. In the quiet, unguarded moments, questions gnawed at her resolve. Was the price of success worth the loneliness? Could ambition and love ever truly coexist within her? The victories, when measured against the emptiness of life, lived behind glass walls, and guarded smiles felt hollow and distant. Yet surrender was not an option. The fierce fire burning inside her demanded she press on, even if it meant losing fragments of herself along the way. This climb was a crucible, shaping her into someone both stronger and more fragile than she had ever imagined. And so, she pressed forward, closing deals, breaking barriers, and building her empire from the ashes of a fractured past. But with every milestone the cost grew steeper. Each success came wrapped in shadows of sacrifice, each triumph tinged with questions. Was she rising toward redemption, or drifting further away from the love she had once vowed to avoid? The journey was far from over, and the price of power loomed ever higher on the horizon. Yet despite the uncertainty, she clung to the fragile hope that somewhere beyond the next summit lay not just victory, but a chance to reclaim the pieces of herself she had lost. Just when her climb to the pinnacle seemed unstoppable, the very ground beneath her began to crumble. The empire she had painstakingly built was never truly hers to command. It had always been shadowed by a hidden truth, buried beneath smiles polished for public view. Betrayal came like a lightning strike, sudden, brutal, and impossible to ignore. The person she had trusted above all else, the co-founder who had stood beside her in countless battles, was revealed to be not just a stranger in the boardroom, but her own sibling, a ghost from a past she had long tried to bury. The walls she'd built around her life shattered in that instant, leaving her to question every decision, every alliance, and everything she believed about herself and her journey. The blow of betrayal was only the beginning. Her mentor, the man who had once been her guiding star, her source of wisdom and encouragement, was unmasked as a thief, his hands stained with deceit and greed. The weight of these revelations crushed her spirit, threatening to break the fragile resolve she had maintained. But deeper still, a darker truth gnawed at her soul. She was no longer just fighting for a company, but for her very life. A grim diagnosis, whispered only in the sterile silence of hospital rooms, loomed like a shadow she dared not speak aloud. She hid this secret, a poison in her veins, from everyone around her, even as the empire she'd fought to save teetered on the brink of collapse. The battle within was as fierce as the one without. As the cracks spread through her empire, trust dissolved like mist under the harsh light of suspicion. Allies turned cold, friends became foes, and those once loyal transformed into enemies overnight. The fortress she had built around herself grew thicker and more impenetrable, walls of steel forged from fear and necessity. Every decision became a high-stakes gamble, every meeting a battlefield fraught with unseen dangers. Yet beneath that hardened exterior, a relentless gnawing fear lurked, the terror of being exposed, not merely as a powerful leader, but as a fragile, flawed human being. The narrative she had once believed was destined for triumph now spiraled into a desperate struggle to cling to whatever remnants of control and hope remained. In this fractured moment, she made a choice that defied everything she had once believed. Instead of reaching out to investors or corporate allies, she sought the one thing she had spent years pushing away: family. Estranged and distant, they had been left on the sidelines of her life, casualties of ambition and pride. But now, those same family ties became her lifeline, fragile threads weaving a fragile safety net beneath her crumbling world. The walls of fear and pride began to crack as she faced a daunting truth: she could not walk this path alone. Love, once rejected, feared, and denied, was now the slender, trembling thread that might pull her back from the abyss. But accepting help meant risking everything she had fought so fiercely to protect. Vulnerability, once a weakness, became her only hope. The collapse of the empire was no longer simply a corporate crisis. It had become a battle for survival on every level. The web of betrayal, the weight of the secret illness, and the shattering revelations converged in a moment of raw, unguarded vulnerability. She stood at a crossroads, faced with an impossible choice: continue to fight alone, risking total loss, or trust in the fragile bonds she had once denied. The ground beneath her feet had fallen away, but from the ruins a new path emerged, one where true strength was no longer measured by solitude or control, but by the courage to open her heart, to let love in, and to allow herself to be saved. It was a reckoning unlike any other, an awakening to the power of connection and the hope of redemption. The boardroom buzzed with an uneasy silence, the kind that fills the space when legacies hang in the balance. The woman stood at the head of the polished mahogany table, her posture poised but her heart pounding like thunder in her chest. Around her, the board members exchanged glances, weighing ambition against loyalty, old grudges against new possibilities. This was no ordinary vote, it was a reckoning. She knew what was at stake, the empire she'd fought so hard to save, and the fragile threads of family that still tied her to the past. "This vote is not just about numbers," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside. "It's about who we are, what we stand for, and what we're willing to fight for together." Amid the weight of decisions and murmured calculations, she sought out the one person who had become both rival and family, the sibling she never expected to face in this battle. The boardroom seemed to fade away as she reached across the divide, voice softening from steel to something raw and human. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words heavy with years of pain and regret. "For everything we lost, for the silence that broke us, and for what we could still become if we try." The sibling's eyes flickered with surprise, vulnerability surfacing behind a mask of doubt. It was a fragile truce, born not of strategy, but desperate hope, a shared history refusing to be erased by betrayal. Then came the final speech, a moment suspended in time where everything laid bare, the sacrifices, the failures, and the relentless fight to reclaim what mattered most. Her voice trembled at first, raw with emotion as she spoke of legacy, not just in dollars or deals, but in love and forgiveness. "This empire is not mine alone," she declared, eyes scanning the room, catching glimmers of understanding and empathy. "It belongs to those who dared to love, to fight, and to stand together when everything seemed lost." The silence that followed was profound, an acknowledgement that beneath the steel of ambition lay a heart claiming its humanity, no longer afraid to be seen. As the votes were tallied, tension thickened the air until the final count was called. The room seemed to hold its collective breath, teetering on the edge of irrevocable change. Yet, amidst the official formalities and shifting alliances, a quiet moment of grace unfolded. A father and daughter, long estranged by pride and pain, shared a wordless embrace in a shadowed corner. No promises were made, no words spoken, but in that embrace was a profound forgiveness, a fragile bridge built from the ashes of past wounds. The empire might burn around them, but in that moment, love quietly endured, a silent rebellion against the chaos threatening to consume everything. With a vote behind her, the boardroom slowly emptied, leaving her alone beside the vast window overlooking the glittering cityscape. The hum of life below contrasted starkly with the storm that still raged inside. Nothing was fully resolved. Alliances remained fragile, futures uncertain, but everything had changed. Power, she realized, was a fragile thing, shifting with every choice and every heart won or broken. But love, the love she had long denied herself, was the strength she had finally embraced. The moment was monumental and deeply personal, an irreversible turning point. She breathed in the night air, ready to face whatever came next, no longer alone. The boardroom battles had ended, but the echoes lingered in every quiet corner of the office. Walking through the vast, empty halls flooded with soft morning light, she felt the weight of all she had sacrificed: late nights, broken promises, fractured relationships. The company stood stable once more, but the victory was bittersweet, carved from pain as much as perseverance. She wasn't the same woman who had once believed power alone could protect her. Now she understood that true leadership meant embracing vulnerability. As she paused by a window, watching the city wake below, she realized that what she had gained wasn't just control. It was wisdom born from loss, and a fragile hope for something more. Far from the towering glass and steel of the corporate world, a man once consumed by ambition found a different kind of redemption. Sitting in a quiet garden as dawn broke, the soft golden light casting long shadows, he held a letter, one he had written but never dared to send. His hands trembled, not from age alone but from the weight of regret that had haunted him for years. The empire was now in others' hands, yet what mattered most was the chance to rebuild what he had nearly lost: time with his family. The scars of absence and pride remained, but so did a new resolve: to be present, to heal, and to cherish the fragile moments still left. The woman who had once vowed never to let love rule her life now found strength in opening her heart. Slowly, she let down the walls she had built to shield herself from pain, reaching out to family and friends she had pushed away. In laughter shared over simple meals and late-night talks, she rediscovered the human connections that power had once overshadowed. The legacy she was crafting was no longer a cold empire of stone and steel, but a living testament to resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to be vulnerable. Love was no longer a threat, it was her anchor and her greatest victory. Even in moments of healing, the shadows of past sacrifices lingered. The pain of lost time and strained relationships was never far beneath the surface, a quiet ache she carried with grace. Sitting by a large window, the woman watched the sunset paint the city in deep golds and purples, the sky a canvas of endings and beginnings. She understood that legacy was not about perfection or unbroken strength. It was about embracing one's flaws, confronting the past, and choosing to build something meaningful despite the scars. It was about hope, about acceptance, and about the courage to keep moving forward. The empire, once forged in ambition, loneliness, and relentless drive, had transformed into something far richer, a story of sacrifice, love, and renewal. As night fell, and stars began to twinkle in the velvet sky, she stood on a rooftop terrace, eyes closed, breathing in the cool air. The battles had left scars, but they also brought wisdom and strength. She had lost much along the way, but gained something invaluable, a heart rebuilt, open, ready for whatever future awaited. This was her true legacy, not monuments of power, but a life lived fully and fiercely, with love as her guiding light. In the fragile hush of early morning, before the world had fully awakened, she stood alone before a mirror that bore faint cracks, each one a silent witness to the battles fought and scars earned. Her reflection was a mosaic of strength and vulnerability, resilience and regret. "He left the company," she murmured softly, voice thick with memories and unspoken words, "but he never left her." Those words reverberated like a quiet anthem in the stillness. The empire, the power, the endless struggles, they were fragments of a larger story, one of love that endured beyond boardrooms and broken promises. Outside, the city breathed slowly awake, bathed in the pale light of dawn, hinting at new beginnings forged from old endings. Behind her, the night sky exploded with fireworks, vivid bursts of color painting the heavens in oranges, blues, and purples. The city's skyline was alive with celebration, a chaotic dance of light and sound that contrasted sharply with the quiet inside her heart. Yet this distant spectacle was deeply personal, a silent homage to the storms weathered and the fragile victories claimed. She watched, breath held, as each explosion seemed to wash over her wounds, lighting them softly, healing the invisible cracks within. It was a moment suspended between endings and beginnings, proof that even in destruction, there was the promise of brilliance reborn. Far below, in a quiet corner of the corporate world, a small hand reached slowly toward the same grand chair that had once symbolized power and command. The child she once was, the fierce, determined girl who had vowed never to be broken, now sat wide-eyed with wonder and tentative hope. Her fingers brushed the polished wood, tracing the edges of a legacy both heavy and fragile. The future stretched before her like an uncharted horizon, vast and full of possibility. The story had come full circle. Wounds had been transformed into strength, loss into renewal, and the broken pieces were ready to be woven into a new tapestry of resilience, love, and unyielding promise. Turning away from the fractured mirror and the ghosts of yesterday, she stepped into the radiant embrace of morning light. The office lobby was awash with golden hues, the city beyond alive with new energy and endless possibility. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges, unknowns, and the whispers of what might be. But this time, she carried more than ambition. She carried love, a fierce, quiet force that had grown through every trial and scar. The story that began in heartbreak and isolation now moved forward with grace and unshakable hope. She was no longer alone, she was whole. As the city awoke around her, she returned to the rooftop, where so many battles had been fought in silence. The wind whispered softly through her hair, carrying away the final remnants of doubt and fear. The fireworks had faded, but their glow lingered, a reminder that even the darkest nights must give way to dawn. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the steady rhythm of a heart finally at peace. The past would never be forgotten, but it no longer defined her. Love had found its way in, reshaping everything with gentle power. And with that quiet strength, she was ready to write the next chapter. One, not of empires or titles, but of courage, forgiveness, and unbreakable bonds that would endure beyond time.